Join us at Glossy's Beauty and Wellness Summit from November 11th through 13th in Napa, California. Influential beauty and wellness leaders will meet to discuss strategies and pain points, discover innovative tech, and ultimately make valuable business connections through one-on-ones and casual networking. For a limited time, we're offering $200 off with promo code GBS24, no spaces. Again, that's GBS24 with no spaces. Go to glossy.co/beauty summit for more information and to secure your pass today. Join us September 12th in New York City as Digiday, Modern Retail, and Glossy bring together brand and agency leaders to connect as industry experts from Colgate, PepsiCo, and more dive into the rise of retail media and how it's begun to mature, providing an exclusive deep dive into the best practices and winning strategies. For a limited time, we're offering $100 off with promo code RETAILMEDIA, no spaces. Again, that's RETAILMEDIA with no spaces. Learn more and register today at digiday.com/retailmedia.
Hello and welcome to the Glossy Podcast. I'm senior fashion reporter Danny Parisi, and I'm very excited to welcome our guest this week, Aurora James. Aurora is the founder of the luxury footwear brand Brother Vellies, which started around 10 years ago and has been worn by everyone from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to Beyonce, Zendaya. Lots of amazing celebrities are big fans of the brand. You also might know her from creating the 15% Pledge, which was a drive to get major fashion retailers to increase the representation of Black-owned businesses on their shelves to at least 15%. And we're going to talk about both her brand, we're going to talk about the 15% Pledge, and I'd also love to ask her a little bit about some of the gains and setbacks that have been made in fashion around diversity, but also about how she's been growing her brand and all the usual businessy stuff we talk about on this podcast. But Aurora, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat today. There's so much going on.
There is a lot. It has been an insane week. It's been an insane couple weeks, actually, I guess.
It's been an insane year. It's been an insane life. It's all been
lifetime.
Insane. Yeah. We're how are we still alive? I mean, we're all hanging on at a thread, and here we are about to talk about, clothes and makeup and business and all of that.
Real quick before we get into like a lot of the stuff that's happening now, I gave a very quick summary of your kind of like fashion background. Anything else you want to add about sort of like how you started Brother Vellies, how you got into fashion? When did you first kind of conceive of the brand and realize that's something you wanted to do?
Well, I guess from an additive standpoint, there's something that I also do that I'm pretty proud of, which is I'm the vice chair of the Council of Fashion Designers of America. And I bring that up only because, first of all, I think a lot of people don't realize how much time, effort, and energy it takes to be on the board of a nonprofit, right? Which is also unpaid labor, but important because nonprofits belong to the people versus corporations. And I think I'm really proud that I started Brother Vellies like at a flea market in the Lower East Side, and then fast forward a few years later, working on this organization, which not only empowered me, but I think has empowered so many other people and is also changing a lot, which I'm really excited about as well.
Yeah. And, I didn't say this either, but you also had a memoir come out recently. So there's a lot of stuff you've been working on.
It's true.
Wildflower, I believe it's called.
Yes, Wildflower. That was a year ago. The paperback just came out, though, last month, which is really exciting. And then I also work on something called Parity Collective, which is a private equity fund to invest in Black and founders of color.
So how do you balance all that stuff? I'm sure you've been asked this a bunch, but it feels like I was going to say even one of those things feels like a full-time job.
It is. Anyone that says they balance more than one job is lying.
Yes, I agree. But I mean, do you have ideas? And I mean, I guess because they're all sort of different areas, you're maybe not like, coming up with an idea and it's like this works better for this project or another, because they're all kind of in, doing different things. But I don't know, do you go through periods where you're like, the next couple of weeks I really have to focus on Brother Vellies. The next couple of weeks I really have to focus on
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a natural ebb and flow to that, right? Like I definitely planned on focusing more on Brother Vellies all this week, right? But given, and I'm not sure when people are hearing this, but we're recording on Monday, July 22nd, and yesterday, July 21st, Biden stepped down. So I think that created a whole bunch of other work, because I also work on something else called Designers for Democracy, where it's a bunch of us who design merch for the DNC. So that was more work. So I think every day is a whole new landscape. And I think you have to give what you can give to everything. And you also have to just check in on your emotional capital. Like sometimes I don't have any more to spend, right? So it's easier for me just to work on the investment side of things and say, okay, like what does this P&L look like? How are these other businesses doing? How can I be helpful here? Versus other times, I just feel like the only way that I can respond to some of what's going on in the world is through being creative, and that my medium of choice is footwear. So I'll really lean into design on another week. So I think it really all ebbs and flows. But to that point, there is a certain level of demand that each requires that pulls at you, and there's only so many hours in a week. So,
So do you feel a little bit kind of maybe creatively recharged if you're spending some time working on kind of the more businessy stuff, and then more recharged to tackle that when you spent some time, designing and in the creative space?
I think recharged is a pretty lofty word comparatively to how I felt over the past 4 years ever at any point, or 8 years really. But I think able is better. I just also want to manage expectations for people about what life is supposed to be like when you take on that much work, or even what it means to be an entrepreneur. I think we all took in so much content about this is what it's like to be a girl boss, and this is the breaking glass ceilings and doing this and doing that, and running in stilettos while you're holding a baby on a, way to IPO, that it's just that sounds like hell to me, there's just, it's a lot. And so burning out in that situation is normal, failing sometimes is normal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, what was it like getting Brother Vellies off the ground before you had, all these other projects? I'm sure, back then you were still doing a lot of different things, but what was it like when that was kind of maybe the biggest concern and you didn't have as many other responsibilities?
Oh my gosh, it was amazing, because you have to think about this idea of it being too small to fail, right? I'm a judge in the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund, and sometimes what I get so excited about with some of these really young brands is they can do anything, right? Because a lot of these people still have full-time jobs. They're just trying to figure it out. They're putting their first designs to market. They maybe have one retailer. That retailer's pretty flexible with them. It's this is your chance to really become who you are and to take risks. And you are in some ways too small to fail at that point. And that is a really beautiful place to be in. I think also I was blissfully naive about how much work it was, how much money it costs. And I'm so grateful that I was that naive, because God knows I probably wouldn't have done it if I knew really how much work it was. And so I think that naivete can really be a great ally at certain times when you're ready to launch a business. But it was wonderful, but it was also exciting and scary. I mean, I knew nothing, right? So I didn't know people in fashion really or anything. So I think it worked out.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. If you knew just how hard it was going to be, that might have discouraged you rather than, encouraged. I'm not sure.
1,000%. If someone was guess what? You're going to feel like all of your dreams are coming true, and then you're going to take a $70,000 loan and it's going to balloon to over $1 million, I would be sign me out.
Yeah.
But that was part of the reality of what happened. And I think those are also the stories that we don't talk about because we're too busy posting on Instagram, the moment that Beyonce wore the shoe or whatever. Right. And I think that part of the reason why I also wrote my book was to dispel a lot of the rosy colored lens and just show people that you might have really bad months with your business, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a failure or a bad business person. It just means that that's how life is. And it's really hard to run a small business in America.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if, I feel like at the same time, the customer, the average person, I think is really good at sniffing out when something's kind of fake or, put on. And they also, a lot of brands have told me that, whenever we make a very off the cuff, like TikTok video that's very casual and just shows what stuff actually looks like in the design studio or something, people like that. But then at the same time, it does feel like some brands, some founders, some companies are like even more kind of protective and defensive and like really concerned with, protecting the image of either themselves or their brand. I don't know what to make of that kind of contradiction. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but
I don't know. Where do you feel like I fall in that scale?
I think that I was actually, one of the things I was going to ask is that I feel like you are quite, you're prevalent in the marketing of Brother Vellies and you're pretty, I think, vocal and open. And like you said, you wrote an entire book to kind of dispel some of those very artificial images. I don't know. I think you strike me as a very kind of like modern, founder or designer where there is a lot of access. I mean, I don't know if you feel this way, but there, especially in fashion and especially in luxury fashion, I think there are a lot of designers who are just like, complete mysteries. I don't know if you feel
no,
mysterious.
Definitely. I mean, they work very hard at that. No, I don't really feel mysterious. Actually, I feel like I pretty much wear my heart on my sleeve. I think to the people who've actually been following me for years, I think they have a really good understanding of who I am, what my values are. I think even when I put things out that I'm like, ugh, people are going to hate this, Last night there was people on my group chat. It sounds like we both have very active group chats in our life, but someone on my group chat was like throwing out this idea of like Mitt Romney as like the VP pick for Kamala Harris. And
I've heard that.
People were debating that. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I should throw it out to Instagram and see what they said. And then someone's like, you're an idiot. You're going to get like slaughtered by your followers for suggesting a Republican join a Democratic ticket. But I just wanted to know what people thought about it. And it's also just, I think we have more data points on who I am at this point that hopefully there wouldn't be an entire indictment made about me based on like one question that I asked people. So I think I try to be a little bit more honest because also like we're all really complicated individuals. We have complicated histories. We have complicated relationships to how we see the world and how we love and how we process anger and disappointment and expectation and all of those things. And I think I try to be honest about some of that.
Yeah. Do you ever feel the pull or the compulsion maybe to like take a step back and maybe become one of those sort of mysterious designers who is not very visible, or does that not feel like you?
I decided not to share my current romantic partnership because I think I was there. I shared my last one a little bit more. And I think that ended up being painful in some ways for both of us, So I think just in terms of protecting parts of myself, that then I feel it, even though I feel like oddly, I feel like oddly weird to hold something back. But at the same time, that's also just like not really what I feel is the most interesting. I mean, there's so many more things in the world than I don't know. Is that bad?
Than that, yeah. No, that makes sense. Mean? There's no. I don't think so at all. Actually, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is something you did post about, which is the lawsuit against the Fearless Fund, which plays into a larger kind of topic, which is like this kind of, we've all sensed it, a sort of growing kind of reactionary backlash to a lot of the efforts toward making fashion and just kind of like the world in general, more equitable. Clearly, I think, an organized reaction. It's not, I think, just like a natural kind of grassroots thing. This lawsuit, very organized. But you posted, quite candidly talking about it, explaining your kind of thoughts about it. Do you want to like tell me just a little bit of kind of what do you make of that lawsuit in particular, and also just this whole kind of wave Do you feel like there was a good Reuters article talking about how it's already kind of having a chilling effect, and a lot of companies are maybe a little more hesitant to talk about stuff than they were a couple of years ago. I don't know. What's your take on sort of where we are?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely having a chilling effect. I've heard the term like DEI hires even a few times in spaces that I've been in that I felt like were fairly progressive spaces. I think, affirmative action being overturned at the Supreme Court is a very big deal. I think that, the Fearless Fund being sued is of course, a byproduct of that. I think we're about to see a lot of other lawsuits kind of across the board. I think it's very easy to strike against like race-based issues. But when we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, I mean, it's not just about Black people, right? It's about a whole host of different people, right? And we have to be able to fight back against their attacks. And I think the thing that I know for sure is that people don't waste energy fighting things that they don't feel are a threat to them. And that movement organized because DE&I is working, right? And I don't think what we need to let them do is turn the phrase DE&I into a swear word. There's nothing wrong with having a vision of America that is inclusive for a great many people, right? For everyone. And I think for me, like I truly in the bottom of my heart believe that the country will be a better place the more we are all allowed to be ourselves and experience like love and compassion, empathy for each other, right? And the more we force each other to hide or be marginalized, the more anger and resentment will build in the world. And I think that that's literally bad for all of us. So that's why I believe in diversity. I also, by the way, just think it's a very smart business decision.
Yeah.
I also just, to me, I'm like, are you guys dumb? Like you're that angry that you're willing to like cut off your nose to spite your face and have, a company that's just only a bunch of like, cis white men because you just hate everyone else. Like that's crazy to me. And you will probably lose money as a result of that because you're not even going to be able to speak effectively to your audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is crazy to me how quickly the sort of window can shift. And, like you said, I think there is a strong effort to make DEI or similar kind of like terms into, a word that people are scared to say. And literally you can see it happening. I mean, I think there are a lot of companies, there are a lot of executives and people who frankly don't like maybe are not super personally morally invested in it and will just like they'll do it if they feel like it's a okay thing to do and they won't if they feel like it's not,
Yeah. Have you seen any
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you've seen any examples of it happening near you that have been surprising to you.
I mean, I'm not sure if I could name a specific company, but I do feel like there are a lot of things of just, initiatives that kind of quietly just fade to the background and maybe don't get renewed season after season after season. I know my boss, Jill, who is the normal host of this podcast, has told a story about talking to a designer who had a lot of diversity on the runway one season and then the next season didn't. And Jill asked her about it and she was like, oh, we did that last season. Like,
really?
Yeah, we already checked that box, and that to me is that kind of mindset of it's not really my personally held belief. It's just something I saw everyone else doing and I went along with it. And then now I'm not seeing as many people,
I can't eat like that. Yeah. To me is just so. The other thing that I have to just like, Daniel, I'm Canadian. So this is like, is just not that Canadians are perfect, but like to me, the idea that a designer would think that and then say that is just so crazy, especially when it's like no one has to buy your purse, girl. Like there are a lot of purses. I mean, I don't know that this girl makes purses. I don't know who this woman is, but like, P.S. I will figure it out. But also like, sorry, Jill, but like, it's just like, what? what? And then also as consumers, we have to get it together, right? Like we have to put our money where our mouths are. I think that there's a pacificity that happens where we feel like, oh, we're just one drop in the ocean. But that is a way that people want you to feel that's like part of a capitalistic engine. You are not just one drop in the ocean. We are in the attention economy. There are ripple effects that happen. If you unsubscribe, if you stop looking, if you do all of these things, if you stop spending dollars, that thing will lose its power, right? You have to redirect your attention and your dollars to the things that you want to see succeed and win, right? If you stop engaging with the DE&I stuff, the DE&I stuff will stop existing. If you stop engaging with your friend who, has a company that is based on a cause that you care about, right? That company will stop existing. That's just how it rolls, right? And sure, we all want to be comfortable. We all want to do what's easier, but at what cost?
Yeah. And so that's like the idea of the 15% pledge is like, let's, make it happen, right? Like that, let's like put, make it a material reality and not just talk.
Yes.
And, talk and representation and things like that are all amazing, but without like the kind of like actual material support, it things like this can be very susceptible to, like we're saying, those very organized campaigns to end them.
Yes. So that's one part. Like number one, I fear like, are we going to get sued? Because obviously we're prime candidates for that. But I also just feel like, we've got big muscles over here. So bring it. But then number two is like, one of the decisions that I made early on in 2020 is I didn't want to solicit donations from the public because I felt like there were other urgent causes that, should be the focus. That's just how I felt. It was also some of my own insecurities because we were building the plane while we were flying it, trying to figure out how it would work. But also for me at this organization, it's like we have over a dozen people that work there. And when corporate dollars dry up, that also impacts our ability to do the work that we're doing because we've been funded largely by those types of organizations and companies. So it scares me for our ability to keep doing this work, right? And it's like, the pledge has put over 800 Black-owned brands onto the shelves of retailers across this country. That also said, if consumers aren't shopping those brands anymore, they will not maintain their shelf space because that's how business works. So just with any other movement, like you can't take progress for granted. It has to be constantly fought for and upheld. As Beth Ann Hardison says, activism has to stay active, right? It's not like, oh, okay, I did that. Gotta go, right? It's like it's easy to be friends with people in great times. It's much harder to keep showing up like after, the black boxes have lost themselves from your feed or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and it does feel like we are in kind of the harder time now, and the people and the companies that sort of like are quietly slipping out are, it's very notable.
Are you a brand in the fashion or luxury industry? The Glossy Fashion and Luxury Awards provide the opportunity to recognize your company's work with categories including Sustainable Brand of the Year, Best Collaboration, Best Experiential Marketing Activation, and more. Don't miss the chance to be recognized alongside past winners from Good American, Skims, and Gucci. Learn more and start your entry at glossy.co/awards/fashion.
I wanted to ask also, like from a fundraising perspective, I just spoke with someone who had was raising money for her second company, and she was telling me about her horrible experience raising money for her first company. And one of the things she said was like, I knew talking to these investors that it was not going to be the right fit. Like they were rude and like didn't understand the company, but they did offer me money, and like I knew it was going to be bad, and I still accepted anyway. And it was a bad experience, but she basically told me though, if you're a first time founder or a first time, it's your first time talking to investors, your first time trying to raise money. And she also was a woman of color as well. That she felt like she just had to take it no matter what, because like you don't really get to pick when you're, just starting out. Wonder if you had any thoughts on that. If you are 10 years ago starting up Brother Vellies and, maybe you get an offer of investment and it's for some reason doesn't seem ideal, like would you still take it? I don't know. Do you think that
I never took
founders right. You didn't
no,
never took any outside
and
investment.
Still bootstrap Brother Vellies because so many reasons, right? And I also have a podcast called Friends and Family where we just talk about financial issues for founders. But I mean, for me, firstly, every investor that I met had expectations of growth for the business that I didn't think would be sustainable or would force me to make decisions that weren't in line with my values. I also didn't necessarily at that point see an exit opportunity for Brother Vellies. And if you're taking capital from someone, you need to have some sort of exit plan, right? That's extremely hard for fashion brands. That's why there's a lack of dollars coming in, because there's a lack of exit opportunities for American fashion brands. So until the American fashion industry figures that problem out, we're going to continue having a lack of dollars in, right? The beauty industry, on the flip side, is entirely different. There's a ton of funding there because there's a ton of exit opportunities. So it's much easier to raise money as a beauty brand than it is a fashion brand, exponentially, for a whole host of reasons, right? Would I, if I was starting a business now and I had the intention of raising money, would I feel compelled to take dollars even if they weren't smart dollars for me? No, I think I would probably rather not do it.
Yeah.
Because what are you working for? Like, who do you want to be a slave to? I don't know. It's just really difficult. It's like, if you want to work, if you're raising money, you're going to be accountable to the money that you're taking from people, and the people that you're taking the money from are also accountable to the people that gave them the money, right? So, like, I wouldn't really advise putting yourself in that situation. I also just think investment dollars are harder to come upon right now than they were. And so the best thing that we could all do is try to build business models where we're going to need to take in less capital from other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, do you have any advice on that, I guess, on, running a successful business and growing? I know growth is like kind of the word that every investor wants to hear,
yes.
But without that, I mean, I don't know. I think you're right that it seems like a lot of the companies I know, they take funding and then now they're beholden to whoever that is, and with all the baggage that comes with it. Whereas it seems like maybe it sometimes might be safer to do it without that.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to know your business. You have to know your financials. You have to make sure your projections make sense. Like, you have to see, before you raise money, you have to see the entire picture, right? It's like, okay, you're taking in money. If you're raising money right now, what is your plan to sell the business in 5 years so that you can have a liquidity event? If you don't see that, and if you can't show the investors that, and if you aren't willing to do whatever it takes to 5x or 3x or 10x, whatever they're expecting, their return, then you can't take the money in. That's how it goes, right? It's like the other day I was in a room full of entrepreneurs. They said, how many of you guys are hoping to raise money? Like 90% of the hands shot up. And then I said, how many of you guys are planning or hoping to sell your business within the next 5 to 7 years? And 90% of those hands went down. And I was like, okay, the math already isn't mathing, right? So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect there. It's like everyone wants an investor, but no one wants to deal with what that looks like in the long run. And so I think the best thing that we can all do is start building stronger, smarter, healthier businesses from day one. And does that mean that you're going to be able to like grow to $10 million in 2 years? Probably not. But also, do you need to?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
the investors would want you to do that, but
do you have to do that? Right. Also, do
right.
you want to run a $10 million business? Do you actually know what that looks like? Because the girls that are posting Instagram content from like Capri, like, are not actually running those $10 million businesses. Yeah. That's a different job.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
So getting in the weeds of being an entrepreneur is a full-time job. Whatever it is that you're actually doing as that entrepreneur, that's like the minor. The entrepreneur is the major, right? Like that's what you spend your time doing. You spend your time like reviewing HR docs and legal docs and doing all these other things that have nothing to do with probably the passion that you initially started with.
Yeah. But they're maybe have nothing to do with what you want to do, but they also are vitally important and not something you can,
1,000%. And yes, it's very hard.
Yeah.
The summary is it's hard.
It's hard. Yeah. Let me ask you a couple more questions about Brother Vellies, like just because we try to go into this with all of our guests, and I always think it has some interesting, answers. But what's your it's you said footwear is your medium of choice, and you make amazing footwear. You also you've expanded out of that a little bit. There's bags and other kind of stuff as well, correct?
Kinda. I mean, like sometimes I will make, other things if I feel called to, but 90% of it is still bags. 99% of it is, shoes.
Or shoes,
Mm-hmm.
shoes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about how you're sort of selling between, direct to consumer, wholesale, that kind of stuff? Do you have any thoughts on sort of like how you split that up and what's working for you?
I like to get as close to my customer as humanly possible. And I like them to be in safe environments, so I definitely think about that as it relates to wholesale partners. And then I think the other thing is for years I was designing like 4 to 6 collections a year. And now I am not as interested in doing that. Because I don't feel like people need that much newness, and I don't know that I want to be a part of creating that feeling within consumers. So I'm sort of really doubling down on some of our like core favorites and like the styles that I love the most that have been made for like many generations are original Vellies that are made in South Africa. Our huaraches in Mexico, our doodle boots, like those things that are a huge part of our revenue, but also like what we're known for, where we have the most repeat customers that aren't these like hyper fashion-y things necessarily, but are like the things that you go back to day in and day out in your closet. And I think for me, Brother Vellies is like kind of always going to be an extension of how I'm actually feeling. And right now I'm feeling like we need to really dig deep in who we actually all are and kind of go to the genesis of like what's important to us. What do we want to say to the world, right? Because I think we have to like cut some of the BS to the side because there's so much that's happening right now in society, and we have to get really clear on what we want to fight for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if there's some connection between the kind of fashion sort of tendency toward a lot of newness, tons of new collections and drops all the time, and what we were just talking about with investors wanting rapid growth and, grow as fast as possible. If there's some, a connecting tissue of FOMO there of, we constantly need to pump out new stuff so we can bring in new customers, so we can grow really fast.
That's exactly how it goes.
Out.
And like, to be clear, I could do that. If someone was like, I need you, I'm holding like a gun to your head, worst case scenario, and I need you to turn Brother Vellies into this giant machine that's just cranking product where you can have like a 10x return in a few years. Like, yes, like there's a very clear roadmap on how to do that. But that's not interesting to me. It's not fulfilling to me. It's not creative to me. It's not additive to me. It's probably not archival. It already exists. Like, I don't want to be that person. We already have that person. Steve Madden is him. He went to jail. He's out of jail. Like, go call your boy. That's not me. You know what I mean? Like, I just, I'm not going to be able to sleep well at night.
Yeah. Yeah, you could turn into that if you wanted to, but that's not that's not the identity.
No. So that what? I can have like a house with 17 more bedrooms?
Right. And which is that meaningfully better than having 16 bedrooms? Like, no, all of it is, more than anyone could have. I think that's really interesting. I also wanted to ask kind of just about like your customer, like, do you feel like they're under any sort of like pressure, financial pressure, wallet pressure, the last couple of years? Like, is that easing up at all? Do you feel like their shopping habits are changing? Are they interacting with you any differently?
So tough because it's usually a considered purchase for a lot of my customers, and we can kind of see that they'll visit the website multiple times, many of them before transacting on something. So I definitely think like there is some financial insecurity right now. I think also in election year, it's also really tough for my customer. I think that my customer tends to have political anxiety, climate anxiety. She's not unlike me. And I think that she wants to spend money on things that are really important to her and that she cares about. I don't think that she's like a Shein shopper necessarily at all. So, I think that she's probably still saving up and probably still buying. We haven't seen a big impact, to be frank with you. But, I think it's a tough year.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also, I think, you're probably not cultivating the type of customer who's like, yeah, I'm like, I don't pay attention to the news. I'm just going to buy some shoes or something. Like I feel like your customer, like you said, is like you. There's someone who cares and is considerate, and then also is affected by, like we were saying, crazy news cycles where lots of stuff is happening.
Yeah. And also like if something crazy is happening, like we're like not going to send out a newsletter that day. You know what I mean? Like, there's been months where I haven't sent any newsletters if it didn't feel like appropriate time to be selling things. Like, so I'm not one of those people that's just going to like hammer you no matter what's going on. So they think there's going to be a natural ebb and flow that's there too, which, by the way, is another thing that I wouldn't have gotten away with doing if I had an investor. There's no way. I wouldn't have been able to start the 15% pledge. I wouldn't be able to do a bunch of the political stuff that I do. There's all of these major parts of who I am that wouldn't have been able to exist with 90% of the investors in the marketplace. They would not have been here for it. They would have been like, I'm sorry, you're going to say what in your newsletter and alienate potentially 50% of our customer base? No.
Right. You have the independence and the kind of autonomy to, you can do whatever you want because you haven't taken those dollars.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. One more sort of like just in the weeds kind of Brother Vellies question for you. Marketing stuff. I've heard from a lot of people, customer acquisition costs are very high. Digital ad spend is a little bit out of control and not always giving you some good ROI. Any thoughts on kind of what's working for you? Is it, like you said, trying to be as close to your customer as possible, email and text?
We don't really do that anymore. Like
do what? Whole... Like meta stuff?
We post on Instagram sometimes, like to the chagrin of everyone, not enough. I actually do our Instagram posting myself. Always have, probably always will. But in terms of running ads, retargeting, all of that, we just don't really do it anymore. It's very expensive.
Yeah.
It's for me, I'd rather just rely on word of mouth and organic newsletters and that kind of thing. But yeah, again, I'm a very different founder, even than a lot of my friends, right? It's my goal is not to have the biggest business in the world, right? My goal is to have a great business that I really care about, that means something to people, and to create products in a way that feels like a true representation of luxury to me, right? Which has to do with how we procure the materials, who's making the shoe, how much those people are paid, the carbon footprint, the longevity of those shoes once they're made, all of that jazz. So I don't know. I would rather have worse margins on the product because we paid people in the supply chain more than like squeeze over there so that I have more money for marketing so that I do more volume sales.
Right. So you can just hand it over to like Meta and Google and have like watch it disappear.
Right. Right.
Which is what it seems like it does. One final thing I want to ask you, and then I think we'll be out of time, but very open-ended question. You can take this wherever you want, but just kind of what's next for you? What are you focused on, prioritizing? Could be Brother Vellies related, or I don't know, anything else in your life. What's your focus?
Well, definitely on the Brother Vellies side, we're kind of doubling down, as I mentioned, on like our favorite things. So the Vellies, the Hirachis, the doodle boots, all of that jazz. I just feel like how I emotionally am feeling about dressing right now is just, I only want things in my closet that I'm literally going to have for another 10 years that are a huge part of my identity that I'll wear all the time. And so that's what I want to push. And then I think as it relates to my identity, I feel like a lot of those issues are on the ballot this November. And so I think for me, in an election year, that's kind of my focus, right? Is like making sure that people show up to vote, and making sure that I do everything that I can to help people understand why that's important. Okay, the only other thing I could say that I am really excited about is that like shoes are definitely one of my favorite mediums, but I also think that there are so many other things that I feel excited about designing, and I truly am a creative director, right? So playing with like interiors, playing in the beauty space, playing in all of these different areas is incredibly fun for me. And I do a lot of it in my spare time, and I don't know. I just think it's really nice to color outside of the lines.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, I think it's very admirable when people can kind of juggle a lot of different things. And like we were saying earlier, I mean, it maybe is extremely difficult to do sometimes, but I think it's great that you can kind of try a lot of different mediums. And then you've always got footwear to come back to.
Always got footwear to come back to, Daniel.
Well, that's all the time we have. But Aurora, this was such a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us and for, going deep on all these topics. This was really great.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And for anyone that's listening that feels like called in any kind of specific way to support DE&I, like please remember to like follow, support, shop anyone that is doing anything that's related to a cause that you care about. So even in my own life, I check myself all the time and say, oh, is 15% of my spending dollars going towards Black founders? What's in my fridge? What's in my closet? And just wherever your like heart calls you, make sure that your wallet is also following it there, because we do have a lot of power, as well as like your attention, because we're in an attention economy as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it can sometimes feel like your support is just going into the void, but it's not. It's not. There's people on the other side receiving
Sometimes I'll talk to corporations and they'll be like, well, we posted a thing and we just got annihilated online. And then I'll look at it and it's like there's 4 comments. And I'm like, whoa, annihilation to you felt like 4 negative comments. So like your comments are being read.
Well, that tells you how powerful those 4 comments are. Like imagine if there were 5 comments that were in support,
Seriously.
That changes the calculus.
Yes. So it's like, be vocal, like social media is real, like be productive, share the things that you want to see amplified, like follow the people that you want to see supported, like do all of that for any cause that you care about. It's not just about the 15% pledge. It's like what Planned Parenthood, whatever the vibe is, roll with it, lean into it.
Yeah. Thinking internally that you support it and then not, doing anything to actually support it it's not good. That's not enough.
Yeah. And even if your people are like, I don't have any money to support, cool. Just like it on Instagram. Just share it. Just bookmark it.
It's free to post a story.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And if you're like annoyed by certain people are like, oh my God, like I hate whoever. Okay, great. Unfollow. Do you know what I mean? Like that's just all that it takes. because people notice that kind of thing. So don't let anyone tell you that you're not powerful because they're lying to you.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Aurora. This was so nice. For those of you listening, don't forget to give us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you listen to this. That really does help us out. Like we were saying, literally one review does legit actually help us out a lot. 1 5-star rating does help us out a lot.
Literally, people don't believe that. They think you're just saying it, but it's actually true.
I have read all of the reviews of the Glossy Podcasts, and most of them are nice. And you better believe the one mean one about me, I definitely think about all the time. So it does it does make a difference. But yeah, don't forget to subscribe because you'll hear interviews with industry insiders like Aurora every Wednesday. And then we also do weekend review episodes every Friday. Until next time, thank you all for listening.